Hi everyone, we're continuing our series of beginner chess videos here on My Chess Notebook. In this video, we're going to describe a checkmating pattern called the ladder mate. It works like this. Suppose that you're at the end of a game and you've got two rooks and a king and your opponent has just a king and you want to checkmate him and you want to do it efficiently. Well, what you're going to do is perform this ladder technique. And the ladder technique in this case begins by rook here to the b5 square. It's not a check, okay, so it's not the idea of a ladder mate is not to check your opponent, but rather the purpose of this move is to build a wall that the king is trapped behind. So that king is now restricted to movement above that wall. It can never step down. So let's say the king steps to the side here. Well, in that case, you're going to bring your other rook up and now call check. Because this first rook is building this wall, king can't go down, and now the second rook is building another wall. So this is forcing the black king up the board. So you're going to force the king to the top of the board and checkmate him. So for example, maybe the king now moves here to the f7 square. You're going to play your rook to b7 with check. The king is going to have to fall back to the top of the board, and then you're going to checkmate him with rook to a8. So he's in check, and that rook on the top rank controls these squares, and this rook controls these squares. So it's checkmate. So to review, the pattern is one rook cuts the king off. It doesn't check it, but it builds this wall and cuts it off. Then the rooks are going to alternate taking steps up the board. And it's called a ladder mate because it's like taking steps up a ladder. Your left foot, your right foot, your left foot, your right foot. So one rook comes and calls check, the king's forced up. The next rook comes up and calls check, king's forced up, and then the other rook goes up and calls check. So the rooks alternate their turns, working the king up the board. So the very first move is not a check, it cuts the king off, but then all the other moves are checks. Okay, check, check, checkmate. All right, let's see it again in another position. All right, so here we'll take one of the two rooks, it doesn't really matter which, and start by building a wall like this. You want to get as close to that king as you can, so that's better than moving the rook here and building a wall, because then the black king has more space behind that wall. So you want to go up as far as you can to that h5 square and build a wall. Now let's say the king moves here. Now the other rook takes a step up the ladder and calls check. So one rook is building this wall, the other rook is building that wall. The walls are always on consecutive ranks or consecutive files. So now the king goes up the board again. All right, but now we have a problem. We can't continue the pattern of bringing these rooks up step by step, because if we brought this rook up to here now to call check, it would simply be taken. And we don't want to lose our rook. So in that case, when the king gets too close and interferes with the rooks taking these alternating steps, what we're going to do is swing the rook to the other side of the board. Get it as far away from that king as you can so the king can't attack the rooks. Now let's say the king moves over. Now since this rook is holding a wall here beneath the king, the other rook is going to go up and call check. And that forces the king up the board, and then the other rook goes up and calls checkmate. Okay, so to review, one rook cuts off the king, it's not a check. The next rook moves up and calls check. The next rook would like to move up and call check, but it's too close to the black king, so it moves far away, and then it goes up and calls check. And then the other rook goes up and calls checkmate. So in these examples, we pushed the black king toward the top of the board. But if you look at the next example, we'll show you that you can push the king to any edge of the board, top, bottom, left, or right. I would say these rooks are well placed to push this king to the left side of the board. This rook is already building a wall here, keeping the king to the left of it. So these rooks are going to take little ladder steps to the left. All right, and we'll begin by calling check, since this rook has a nice wall here. Now that check forces the king to the left. Let's say it goes to the left. Now the other rook goes over and calls check, so they alternate turns. And then the king goes over to the left. The other rook comes over and calls check. King is forced to the left again. Did you notice as it's going to the left that black king is sneaking up towards the top too? Well, that's because now we can't finish the ladder checkmate like this because black would simply take the rook. So it's another case where we have to first swing the rook far away from the black king. And then we're ready to come over here and call checkmate like that. However, the black king now has his turn, and he can move up to the a7 square and threaten that rook. So now if we think that that's checkmate, it's not, because he captures that rook. So in this case, we have to swing the other rook far away from the black king as well. And then the king has to move somewhere, and then we can finish the ladder mate. So to review, we called check, forced the king to the left. We alternated another rook check, forced to the left. The other rook checks, forced to the left. But now the rooks have to get away from the black king so they don't get captured. So one of them goes down. Black king goes up and attacks that one, and that one goes down too. Notice it didn't go all the way down because we don't want those rooks to interfere with each other. It went down to there so that the rook on the c1 square can slide over to that left file, the A file, and call checkmate. Okay, let's look at a messy position. In a real game of chess, it doesn't always work out so nicely because there may be other pieces on the board that complicate things, or your king might get in the way, and so you have to be a little more creative. So let's see how white is going to checkmate the black king. Well, these pawns are on the board here, but they're not playing much of a role because none of them can move. They're blocking each other. The white pawns are going up the board, but they're blocked by the black pawns, and the black pawns are going down the board, but they're blocked as well. So we don't have to worry too much about those, but they do restrict our movement. I noticed that this rook is already building a wall here, so I would like to get the other rook to build a wall on that rank of the board, that sixth rank of the board. So I'm going to begin by moving that rook over to here so that it can go up to here, and then I'd have these two consecutive ranks covered. Let's say the king now moves closer to the center of the board, trying to stay away from the edge. Well, then we can swing our rook up to the g6 square with check. Since this rook is building a wall, this check makes sense because it's forcing that black king toward the top of the board. So the king goes up, and now our king is in the way. We'd like to, go up the ladder here, but the king is in the way. Well, there's different ways you can deal with that. You can move the king out of the way, or what I'll do is move the rook to the left. And so now it can go up to this square and build a wall. All right, let's say the king goes to e7, and then our king goes up and calls check since this rook has this rank held, and that rook is now checking, forcing the king up to the top. Now it went over to this f8 square, f8 square, because it's stopping our rook from completing the ladder mate here, because if we moved the rook up to g8 now, it would simply be captured. So what we're going to do is something a little tricky. It doesn't work so well to move it far away this time because the pawns are in our way. The furthest we could move it is to here. We don't want to move here. It would interfere with our other rook and also be captured by that pawn. So we don't want to move it here because then the king moves left and it still stops us from going up here and calling checkmate. It would get captured. So moving it far away this time doesn't work. So instead what I recommend is moving the king up, and that king supports that square. So now our next move is to move the rook up to this square. In fact, the black king is now forced away. The only legal move is to move to the left to the e8 square, and then we checkmate. Okay, so that was a messier ladder mate. We had to kind of think through how to do it without losing our rooks and forcing that king to the top or the edge of the board. All right, in this position, I wanted to mention that you can do the same thing with queens that you do with rooks. If you have two queens or even a queen and a rook, you can do that ladder process because queens make these straight line walls as well. There are some differences though. One positive thing about having the queens over the rooks is the black king will never be able to approach the queen and threaten to take it because it can't move into check. The queens move on a diagonal. So for example, this king could never go to this square. That queen could take it, not to mention the other queen. So the king won't be able to approach, and that means we don't have to worry too much. We don't have to swing the queens away to the far side like we sometimes did with the rooks. But another thing you have to watch out for when you have a lot of power on the board, we have 18 points worth of power, two 9-point queens, is you have to watch out for stalemate, like we mentioned in our last video. Remember, stalemate means that you didn't check your opponent, but you didn't leave him any legal moves either, and that would be a draw, so you have to be very careful. Okay, but here we're going to do a simple ladder mate and force the king towards the bottom of the board. This queen is drawing a nice wall right here, so we'll bring the other queen forward to build a wall here. So we have these consecutive walls now. So that king, let's say it steps left, it tries to stay away from the bottom of the board. Notice it cannot step right because the queen has that square covered. So let's say it steps left. Then since this queen has a wall on the 4th rank, we bring the other queen down to the 3rd rank and call check. So we have these two consecutive walls. The black king is forced down. The other queen calls check. The black king is forced down, and the other queen calls checkmate. Okay, so that was a sequence of alternating moves. One queen builds the wall, the next queen checks, the other queen checks, and the other queen checks, just like the rooks. Okay, and I mentioned stalemate possibility. Let's take a look. So right here, let's say it's black's turn. Black is in check. You can see this queen is attacking that king. Let's say that black king moves to the f1 square. Now, this queen has a wall on the 3rd rank, so it's tempting to bring this queen down and build a wall on the 2nd rank. So you have these two consecutive walls and you can finish the ladder mate. But you have to be careful because if you do that, queen to here, that's a stalemate. Okay, let's see why. This king is not in check. Neither queen is attacking it, but it doesn't have any safe squares. All of these squares are covered by that queen. This square is covered by both queens, and this square is covered by that queen on a diagonal. So because of the powerful queens, we accidentally stalemated the black king. So let's back up. After the king moved to f1, what should we have done? Well, you could kind of move away from the king, further away and finish the ladder mate, or you can try to abandon the ladder idea and just find another way to checkmate. If in doubt, if you don't want to stalemate your opponent, if in doubt, when you have a lot of pieces like this, just make sure every move is a check. Because if every move is a check, then you can't stalemate. Okay? Stalemate means you did not check your opponent. All right, so let's say we did a check like that. Well, that check turns out to be a checkmate. You can see that none of these squares are available to the black king. For example, this one over here to its left is covered by that queen. So that's actually a checkmate. It's a different kind of mate than the ladder mate, but it works. And you might find other mates as well. For example, moving all the way down here is actually a checkmate too. that covers the back rank, but that square is covered, that square is covered, and that square is covered too. All of the escape squares are covered. So it's a different kind of checkmate. All right, so be careful of the stalemate when you have a lot of power on the board. All right, thanks for watching the video. I hope this ladder mate idea comes up in your own games and you're able to use it. All right, see you for the next one.